The rain had just stopped in the small coastal town of Whitmore Bay, leaving the streets wet and glistening under the soft golden light of the late afternoon sun. Clara Winslow sat on the porch of her small guest cottage, sipping a cup of tea. Her hands, slightly wrinkled from age and years of hard work, rested on the chipped porcelain mug her late husband had bought her decades ago. She gazed at the larger two-story brick house across the narrow gravel path, the house she had lived in for 40 years. It was the home where she had raised her daughter Serena, where birthdays were celebrated, where her late husband James had painted the kitchen cabinets himself, and where the smell of fresh bread and Sunday roasts once filled the air. Now, that house belonged to Serena and her husband, Adrian Kerr. Clara had given it to them as a wedding gift 2 years ago, believing it was the best way to set them up for a good life. She had moved into the guest cottage behind the property, keeping her independence while still being close enough to visit whenever they needed her. It hadn't been an easy decision. That house was more than walls and bricks. It was her history, her comfort. But she had told herself, family comes. Clara still remembered the day she had surprised Serena and Adrian with the deed. They had just returned from their honeymoon in Italy, flushed with excitement and full of stories about cobblestone streets, pasta in Florence, and sunsets in Venice. They were sitting in the living room of the main house, coffee mugs in hand, when Clara slid the brown envelope across the table. "What's this?" Serena asked, raising an eyebrow. "Open it," Clara had said, smiling. When Serena pulled out the crisp legal papers and saw the title deed with her name on it, her mouth fell open. "Mom, this is the house deed." "Our house?" Clara nodded. "Yes. Yours and Adrian's now. Consider it my wedding gift to you both. You deserve a good start, and this house has been our family's heart for years. I want you to make your own memories here." Serena leapt forward and hugged her tightly, tears brimming in her eyes. Adrian, usually reserved, shook Clara's hand and thanked her. It was one of the few times she'd seen genuine warmth in his expression. Of course, Clara hadn't given away everything. Her lawyer had advised her to include a life estate clause, a legal term meaning she could still live in the property, rent it, or even sell it if she wished, until her passing. She had agreed, but she hadn't explained it in detail to Serena and Adrian. It wasn't meant as a trap. It was simply a way to protect herself. After all, life had taught Clara that situations could change quickly, and kindness wasn't always returned. Serena had skimmed the papers quickly, signing without much thought. Adrian, distracted by work calls, barely glanced at them. They were too caught up in the joy of the gift to think about the legalities. Clara didn't mind. She trusted them. For the first year, everything was perfect. Clara visited the main house almost daily, sometimes to bring fresh muffins, other times to help with the garden. When Serena had her first baby, little Oliver, Clara became an essential part of their lives. She babysat often, letting Serena nap or run errands. She cooked hearty meals and kept the laundry folded. Adrian never openly complained, but Clara noticed small things. How he would sigh when she showed up unannounced, how he'd glance at his watch when she stayed past dinner, how his smile never quite reached his eyes when she offered advice on parenting. Serena, on the other hand, seemed to appreciate the help. She'd often say, "Mom, I don't know what I'd do without you." And Clara believed her. It was subtle at first, a tone in Serena's voice, a little more rushed when Clara called. A closed door instead of an open one when she came to visit. Once, she arrived with a casserole only to find Adrian's car gone and Serena in the living room, dressed up, holding her phone. "Oh, Mom, we're actually about to head out," Serena had said. "Maybe next time?" Clara smiled politely, though she felt the sting. "Of course, darling. I'll just leave this here." She walked back to her cottage with the heavy casserole dish still warm in her hands, wondering why her chest felt tight. Adrian was a real estate agent, sharp with numbers and even sharper with words. He was the kind of man who liked control of his schedule, his home, and apparently the people in it. Clara had never had a direct confrontation with him, but she could sense his subtle disapproval whenever she was around. She noticed how he began steering conversations when Serena seemed too warm toward her mother. How he'd make small comments about privacy or boundaries. One evening, she overheard them talking as she walked up the garden path to drop off some fresh herbs. "She's here too much, Serena," Adrian said, his voice low but firm. "We need to set limits. This is our home now." Serena's reply was muffled, but Clara caught the words, "You're right." She froze mid-step, the herb basket heavy in her hands. before quietly turning around and heading back to her cottage without knocking. Clara tried to shake it off, telling herself maybe she was imagining it. After all, families had ups and downs. But a small seed of doubt had been planted. Was she truly welcome here, or merely tolerated because she was useful? The thought kept her awake some nights, staring at the wooden beams of her small cottage ceiling. She didn't resent giving them the house, at least not yet. But she began to realize that generosity could sometimes breed entitlement instead of gratitude. On a damp Thursday afternoon, the weather matched Clara's mood, gray and unsettled. Serena called and asked her to come to the main house. "We need to talk," she'd said. Clara dried her hands on a towel, put on her raincoat, and walked the short path between the cottage and the big house. The garden was muddy, the air cool and sharp. When she stepped inside, Serena was sitting at the kitchen table, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Adrian wasn't there. "Is everything all right, dear?" Clara asked, removing her coat. Serena took a deep breath. "Mom, Adrian and I feel like you're overstepping. You're here too often. We need our space." Clara blinked, unsure she'd heard right. "Overstepping? I was only trying to help." "I know, and I appreciate it, but you're not welcome here like before. Please respect that." The words landed like stones in her chest. Clara nodded slowly, forcing a small smile. "I understand." She put her coat back on, walked out into the rain, and returned to her cottage without another word. Inside, she set her coat on the chair, sat at her desk, and opened the bottom drawer. She pulled out the brown envelope containing the legal deed, the one with her life estate clause written clearly on the second page. She stared at it for a long moment, her mind already moving toward a decision. The rain hadn't stopped that night. It came down steady and relentless, tapping against the cottage windows in a rhythm that almost felt accusatory. Clara Winslow sat at her desk, the faint amber light from the old brass lamp casting a warm halo on the scattered papers before her. But her mind wasn't on the papers. It was on the conversation from earlier that day. "You're not welcome here anymore." The words replayed in her head, each repetition sharper than the last. They were simple words, but they carried years of unspoken meaning. To anyone else, they might have sounded like an awkward but necessary boundary. To Clara, they were a betrayal, a cold dismissal from the very home she had built, loved, and willingly handed over. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the rain streaking down the window. Her chest felt heavy, not from anger, at least not yet, but from something deeper, a hollow ache where love and gratitude used to be. She thought back to the nights she'd stayed up late sewing curtains for that house when Serena was a little girl. She remembered repainting the nursery before Oliver was born, choosing soft yellow walls so the room would feel like sunshine even on cloudy days. She had never kept a tally of the hours she'd spent, the money she'd put in, the sacrifices she'd made. That wasn't what family did. Love didn't need receipts. Or so she thought. Now it felt as though Serena had tallied everything in her own way, and decided Clara's presence was no longer a gift but a burden. Clara's cottage felt especially small that night. The hum of the old refrigerator was louder than usual, the tick of the wall clock almost intrusive. She sat there for a long while, her hands folded over her lap, until finally, she pulled open the bottom desk drawer. Inside lay a brown envelope, its edges slightly frayed from being moved in and out of the drawer over the past 2 years. She placed it on the desk, running her fingers over the flap before slowly pulling out the papers inside. The life estate clause was printed neatly on the second page. Her lawyer, Robert Ashford, had insisted on it when they transferred the house to Serena and Adrian. "It's just a safeguard, Clara," he'd said over coffee in his office. "You're being incredibly generous, but life has a way of surprising you. This clause ensures you're never left without control of your own property." At the time, Clara had thought it unnecessary. She trusted her daughter. But Robert's words now echoed in her mind, as if he'd seen this moment coming. She picked up the phone and dialed Robert's office, even though it was past business hours. His voicemail came on, and she left a simple message. "Robert, it's Clara Winslow. I need to speak to you first thing tomorrow. It's about the house. It's urgent." She hung up, feeling a strange mix of calm and resolve. She wasn't sure exactly what she would do yet, but she knew one thing. She would not allow herself to be treated as an unwelcome guest in the very home she had built with her own 2 hands. The next day, Clara woke early. The rain had stopped, and the garden between the cottage and the big house was drenched and shining. She could see the glint of water on the rose bushes she'd planted years ago, still thriving despite the change in owners. She made herself a modest breakfast, tea, toast, and jam, and dressed in her neatly pressed beige sweater and dark trousers. If she was going to meet Robert, she wanted to look composed. At 9 a.m., she walked into his office, a small but well-kept building just off Whitmore Bay's main street. Robert greeted her with his usual warm smile, though it faded when he saw the tension in her face. "Clara, I got your message. What happened?" She sat down across from him, placing the deed on his desk. "Serena told me yesterday that I'm not welcome in the house anymore. I want to know exactly what my options are." Robert adjusted his glasses, scanning the papers. "You have full control, Clara. You can occupy it, rent it, or, if you choose, sell it. They may have their names on the title, but this clause overrides their control until your passing." Clara nodded slowly. "And if I sold it?" "They'd have to vacate within whatever notice the new owner gives them," Robert replied. "It's completely legal." Clara didn't answer right away. She stared at the papers, thinking about the years of kindness, the casseroles, the sleepless nights with the baby, the lawn she still helped mow. She thought about Adrian's sighs, his sidelong glances, and Serena's tone, cool and almost rehearsed, when she told her to stay away. "I'm not saying I'll do it immediately," Clara said carefully, "but I want to know exactly how it would work if I did decide to sell." Robert leaned back in his chair. "I can walk you through the process whenever you're ready." Later that afternoon, Clara decided to test the waters. She walked over to the big house with a basket of fresh scones, something she used to do every week. She knocked lightly on the back door. Serena opened it, her expression tightening just a fraction before she forced a smile. "Hi, Mom. I thought you might like these," Clara said, holding out the basket. "That's nice." "Thank you," Serena replied, taking the basket but not stepping aside to invite her in. The silence between them was thick, broken only by the faint sound of Oliver's laughter somewhere inside. Clara caught a glimpse of him in the living room, playing with blocks. "I should go," Serena said abruptly. "Adrian's on a work call." Clara nodded, turning back toward the garden path. She didn't miss the way Serena closed the door before she'd even reached the end of the steps. That night, Clara sat at her desk again, the brown envelope still open. She no longer felt unsure. The decision was made, even if the timing wasn't set in stone. She would sell the house, not out of spite, but because she refused to be treated like an intruder in her own legacy. She made another call to Robert the next morning. "I'm ready," she told him simply. Over the next 2 weeks, Clara and Robert worked discreetly. They arranged for a private listing, avoiding the public market to prevent gossip. Robert contacted a potential buyer, a local businessman named Rowan Hale, who had long admired the property. Rowan was interested immediately. "I've been hoping this house would come on the market for years," he told Robert. "If Clara's willing to sell, I can move quickly." The offer was generous, more than Clara had expected. She didn't hesitate. As the sale process moved forward quietly, life on the property carried on as usual, at least for Serena and Adrian. They had no idea what was coming. Clara kept her visits minimal, speaking politely when they crossed paths but never mentioning her plans. Every time she walked past the main house, she felt a strange mixture of sadness and anticipation. It was bittersweet. She would be letting go of the place where her memories lived, but she would also be reclaiming her dignity. The final papers were signed on a Wednesday afternoon. Clara walked out of Robert's office with a small, satisfied smile. The legal wheels were now turning, and soon, the notice to vacate would arrive in Serena and Adrian's mailbox. For now, she kept her silence. She didn't need a confrontation. The truth would speak for itself when the envelope landed in their hands. And that moment, the one where her quiet decision would shatter their comfortable bubble, was only days away. The morning the letter arrived was brighter than most in Whitmore Bay. The sun filtered through thin clouds, casting a gentle light across the Winslow Kerr property. Clara Winslow was already awake, sipping her tea at the cottage window, when she saw the familiar white postal van turn onto the gravel drive. She didn't need to wonder what was in today's delivery. She already knew. The paperwork had been finalized 2 days ago. The buyer, Rowan Hale, had wasted no time in preparing the official notice to vacate for his new property. From her vantage point, Clara saw the postman place the envelope in the black iron mailbox outside the big house. The moment he drove away, the garden felt heavier, as if it knew the quiet storm brewing inside that paper. Adrian Kerr stepped outside in his crisp white shirt and loosened tie, clearly on a break from his home office. He flipped open the mailbox, pulled out the small stack of letters, and paused when he saw the legal envelope stamped with Hale and Associates, attorneys at law. Adrian was the type of man who noticed details, and this detail immediately put him on edge. Clara could see the way his brow furrowed from across the garden. He opened it right there by the mailbox, his posture stiffening as his eyes scanned the document. He froze for a moment. Then he read it again. And again. By the time he walked back to the house, his stride was sharp and quick, his knuckles white from gripping the envelope. From inside her cottage, Clara could hear the muffled sound of the back door slamming, followed by raised voices. She didn't lean closer to listen. She didn't need to. She knew the conversation unfolding in the main house. Serena's voice came first, high and tight. "What do you mean we have to leave? This is our house." Adrian's voice was lower but hard. Apparently not. "This says the property was sold." "Sold, Serena. And we have 30 days to get out." There was a pause, then Serena again, her tone shaking. "That's impossible. Who could have?" "No. No, she wouldn't." The last words trailed off into silence. Clara imagined the exact moment Serena realized who she was. It didn't take long. Clara's phone rang 5 minutes later. She let it ring twice before answering. "Mom." Serena's voice burst through the line, breathless, panicked. "We just got this letter. It says we have to move. It says the house was sold. How is that even possible? Did you know about this?" Clara kept her tone even, almost gentle. "Yes, Serena. I sold the house." "You what?" "You told me I wasn't welcome there anymore. I simply made arrangements to ensure I wouldn't be, either." On the other end of the line, there was a sharp inhale, then silence. Clara could almost hear Serena's mind racing. Adrian came onto the call then, his voice tense and edged with anger. "This is insane, Clara. You gave us this house. You can't just take it back." "I didn't take it back," Clara corrected calmly. "I had the legal right to sell it. The clause was in the deed you signed, both of you. Perhaps you should have read it more carefully." There was another pause, this one longer, heavier. Clara pictured Adrian's face, jaw clenched, eyes narrowing, as the reality sank in. For the rest of the day, the main house was a flurry of activity. From her kitchen window, Clara saw Serena pacing in the living room, phone in hand, calling anyone she thought might help. She saw Adrian at his laptop, his fingers pounding the keys as he searched for loopholes that didn't exist. By mid-afternoon, they'd stopped looking for ways to undo it and started calling around for rentals. Whitmore Bay was small, and the rental market was brutal. High prices, long waiting lists, and nothing as nice as the house they were losing. Oliver, their young son, toddled through the chaos, clutching a stuffed bear. Clara's heart softened for him, but she reminded herself that this situation wasn't his doing, and it certainly wasn't hers either. At dusk, there was a knock on her cottage door. Clara opened it to find Serena and Adrian standing there. Serena's eyes were red-rimmed, Adrian's lips pressed into a hard line. "Mom," Serena began, her voice breaking. We made a mistake. I made a mistake. Please, can we work something out? We'll set boundaries." "Will." Clara shook her head gently. "Serena, this isn't about boundaries anymore. It's about respect. You told me I wasn't welcome in the home I gave you. That told me everything I needed to know. But Oliver," Serena tried, her hand gripping the doorframe. "I love my grandson," Clara said softly, "and I will always be in his life. But the house is no longer yours. That decision is final." The next morning, Rowan Hale himself arrived to walk the property. He was a tall, silver-haired man with a firm handshake and a polite smile. Clara had known him for years. He ran a small chain of shops in town and had always admired the big house. Adrian watched from the porch as Rowan and Clara spoke in the garden, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. Serena stayed inside, pretending to be busy in the kitchen, but occasionally glancing out the window. Rowan was courteous but businesslike. "I'll give them the 30 days, Clara," he said. "But after that, I'll need full possession. I've got renovation plans." Clara nodded. "That's fair." From that day forward, the air between the cottage and the main house was tense and cold. There were no casual visits, no shared meals. Serena avoided Clara entirely. Adrian passed her on the garden path without a word. But Clara didn't mind. She spent her days tending to her flowers, enjoying the quiet, and making plans for her own future now that she had liquidated one of her biggest assets. She would never admit it out loud, but there was a certain peace in knowing the chapter with the big house, and all the disrespect that had come with it, was closing for good. As the 30 days ticked down, boxes began appearing in the main house windows. Trucks came and went, carrying away the life Serena and Adrian had built on what they thought was solid ground. Clara stayed out of the way. She didn't interfere, didn't gloat, didn't offer help. This wasn't about revenge for her. It was about reclaiming her dignity. And when the last day came, and the house stood empty once again, she knew Chapter 4 would be the one where she finally said the words that would stay with Serena for the rest of her life. The last day of the 30-day notice had arrived. It was early morning in Whitmore Bay, the kind of crisp autumn day where the air is sharp but the sunlight is warm. Clara Winslow stood at the kitchen counter in her cottage, slowly buttering a slice of toast. She could see the main house through her window, its once vibrant garden now trampled by moving boxes, furniture wrapped in plastic on the porch, and a large rental truck parked in the gravel drive. The big house looked different now. Not because of the empty windows, but because of the mood hanging over it. It no longer looked like a family home. It looked like a place people were being forced to leave. Inside, Serena was moving through the rooms in silence, her hands trembling as she packed the last of Oliver's toys into a cardboard box. Adrian was outside with 2 movers, giving curt directions as they loaded the truck. His jaw was tight, his voice clipped. The strain of the past month had taken its toll, on both of them. Oliver, too young to understand, sat on the floor hugging his stuffed bear. "Why are we leaving, Mama?" he asked. Serena's throat tightened. "We would just have to, sweetheart." Every box she closed felt like another nail sealing the reality she hadn't wanted to face. The life she'd built here, the life her mother had made possible, was gone. And it was gone because of words she had spoken without thinking. Around midday, Clara saw Serena step out onto the porch alone. She lingered there, looking out over the garden they used to tend together, the one Clara had planted years before Serena was even born. Her gaze moved to the roses, deep crimson and pale pink blooms heavy on their stems. Clara had taught her how to prune them when she was 12. Now, Serena reached out and touched a petal lightly, almost reverently, as if the memory had come rushing back. Clara felt the faintest pull of sympathy. But it was quickly replaced by the reminder of that rainy afternoon when Serena had said the words that had cut so deeply. "You're not welcome here anymore." The sun was just beginning to dip toward the horizon when Clara's phone rang. She recognized the number immediately, Serena's. She let it ring twice before answering, her voice calm. "Hello, Serena." There was a pause, then a shaky breath on the other end. "Mom, we're leaving now." "I see. We don't have anywhere yet," Serena said quietly, her voice breaking. "We're looking, but everything's too expensive or too far. Adrian's talking about staying with his cousin in the city, but I don't know. I don't want Oliver to be uprooted like this." Clara didn't speak right away. She could hear the tension in her daughter's voice, the desperation she was trying to mask. "Mom," Serena continued, almost whispering now, "I know I said things I shouldn't have. I know I hurt you. But please, where will we go?" Clara took a slow breath, looking out the window at the fading sunlight over the house. When she spoke, her tone was steady, not cruel, not angry, but firm. "Somewhere," she said softly, "that welcomes you more than I did." The silence that followed was heavy. Clara could hear Serena's breath catch, could almost picture the tears welling in her eyes. No excuses came. No arguments. Just quiet. "Goodbye, Serena," Clara said gently and ended the call. From her cottage window, Clara watched as Adrian carried the last box to the truck. Serena followed behind, holding Oliver's hand. The boy turned and waved toward the garden. Clara lifted her hand in return, offering him a small smile. Then Adrian closed the truck's back door with a heavy thud, and they climbed inside. The engine started, and the vehicle rolled slowly down the gravel drive, disappearing around the bend. The property was silent again. Rowan Hale, the new owner, had arranged for Clara to have a few days alone in the house before renovations began. She walked up the path for the first time in weeks, the keys cool in her palm. When she opened the front door, the familiar scent of the place hit her. Wood polish, faint traces of lavender, and something else, emptiness. She walked through the room slowly, her footsteps echoing on the bare floors. In the kitchen, she ran her fingers along the countertop where she'd once taught Serena to roll out pie crusts. In the living room, she paused by the fireplace where family photos had once stood. She didn't feel triumphant. She didn't feel regret. What she felt was peace, the kind that comes from knowing you stood your ground, even when it was hard. Later that evening, Clara made herself a simple dinner and sat by the front window, watching the sun set over the garden. The roses glowed in the last light, their colors rich and deep. For the first time in months, she felt entirely at home. The house would soon belong to someone else, but her dignity, her self-respect, that was hers to keep. And that, she knew, was worth far more than any property deed.